guys, so welcome back to the channel. We've just finished the community event. I'm just going to look at the finishing result, and this was the final tally of the times, and 3 seconds away from Neil. A great result really. Neil really did push me to get into that 6 minute area and just really found the sweet spot of the car, I think. So we'll have a little look, set up obviously it was light cloud, not light cloud, I think it was quite a nice day actually, clear day. I forget what time of day it was actually, usually around the 1 o'clock time I think time trials are set at, but we can't change that in a time trial. The weather's always medium, but we'll go in and just have a look at the car tune and have a look at a drive around the circuit. Loads to really look at. Obviously it's a massive lap and you can break it down into the 2 sectors or 3 sectors, sorry, and you can run each sector singularly, which is something I did during trying to get the car set up. Because it's such a long lap, trying to make an adjustment to the car and see if it actually benefits the outcome of the lap was just such a hard task really, because of the length of the circuit. So by breaking it down in time trial and doing each segment, you could actually make adjustments to the car and find out whether it's made a good impact on the handling of the car and obviously the sector time by doing a shorter section of the circuit, which is something I did. So we'll have a little look at the tune. I have got the default tune saved on my phone here, so I'll just have a look at what I adjusted during each one. Yeah, so here we are. So looking at the tyre pressures, these were a real mixed bag really, because initially I started out with a tyre pressure around 27 psi and the front was about 22, and then I lowered it to around 15, and I just really couldn't find the grip level that I was looking for. So I just made a call really to go with the lowest setting that you would get in a GT3 car and went with 18.8 psi, and as standard I think it was 22 on the front, 21 at the rear, but 18 just made such a massive difference to my lap time. It was probably about 2 seconds a lap I was quicker with it set at this. So I just left it at this. I haven't tried it slightly higher or slightly lower. The brake pressure initially is 100%. It's just too much pressure. It's too much application of braking. It just makes it too sharp. The braking during this lap is so accurate. A lot of people seem to think that braking or using the brake pedal is just to stop the car, but it's so much towards turning the car. You know, that slight difference in pressure on the brake pedal can really just help the car turn more. So using the brake pedal during this lap is absolutely paramount to get the car to turn. Along with the brake bias as well, which is usually around 56% on the front. I've lowered this to more of a 50-50, which is obviously 51-49, just to help turn the car, especially through the hairpins, trying to get the car to turn quicker, so just moving the bias a little bit more towards the rear of the car. The brake ducts, close them out as much as I could really, because they just didn't seem to be building up a lot of heat. There aren't very many huge stopping areas on this circuit, so getting the brakes to cool during between each heavy braking zone didn't seem to be a massive problem. So closing out the brake ducts was definitely something that was going to aid acceleration and reduce the drag factor. The handbrake, I just don't use it. It's not used at all during this lap. Coming down to the downforce, originally it was set at 1 and 6, which is for the stable setup. I did try running the loose setup, but it just seemed to be too loose, I thought. I think I set a lap time around 7:20 initially. This was early on in the process, but I still think a stable setup was much better. It was much better default wise. But just increasing the front downforce, obviously it's a 4-wheel drive car, so we're always going to be suffering with the understeer. So increasing as much downforce on the front and reducing it a little bit at the rear, just to aid in increasing the front downforce effect. Obviously, if you're trying to add more front downforce and you've got the maximum downforce already on, the only way you can actually try and increase that front downforce a little bit more is by actually reducing the rear downforce. So I tried this at 4, but at 4 it just seemed to allow the rear end of the car to step out a little bit too much, so 5 was a happy medium. Moving on to suspension. Initially, I think everyone knows I prefer a really heavy wheel. This is set to 300 degrees of rotation, my wheel as per normal. So increasing the caster just adds a little bit more weight to the wheel, and it also adds a little bit more camber on turn-in. Camber, I also adjust this, it was at 2, just added a little bit more at the front to give it a little bit more grip through the corners. Lowering the front suspension, the ride height, this was at 90, just dropped it down to 80. The initial front spring rate is a lot lower than this, I think it was around 135. So just increasing that to add a little bit more responsiveness through the front end of the car. Rear camber, reduce this down a little bit, obviously by reducing the all this is a balancing act. So whatever you adjust on the rear of the car affects the front of the car, and vice versa. If you're reducing camber at the rear, it's almost like adding camber at the front. So in adding some camber at the rear, or reducing the camber at the rear, it also makes the front end of the car more responsive, but it also gives better rear grip under acceleration in a straight line. Obviously, when you come to going through turns, if you're losing the rear end at 1.2 or 1.4 or whatever your value is, if you start losing the car in the corners, you might want to start adding some rear camber. Also, I just reduced the overall ride height of the car by 10mm really. This was at 100. The spring rate on the rear, I've also increased this. So overall, I've stiffened the suspension from what it was default. Moving to the steer ratio, just really tightening this up. This was around 12.4 initially, so bringing it down to 6.9. Yes, the inputs are far less, but you also have to be more critical of how much you're turning the wheel. But it just seems so unresponsive at 12, it's just alien for me. I just like a really short ratio. It just makes the car feel more responsive. Got rid of the toe at the front, didn't think that really added anything. It was at -2, so I just brought that down to normal. And the front end, just reducing it down obviously to try and reduce that front end understeer. Mid corner, I think it was at about 90. I didn't touch the toe at the rear. I think I added a little bit initially, but it didn't particularly help. So rather than trying to increase the internal tyre temperature by increasing the value here, I just left it as it was. I also left the rear anti-roll as it was. Moving on to the dampers. Just bringing the front one down a little bit, the bump stop, just to add a little bit more suspension into the suspension. Left the rear one as it was. What else did we change? The transition, just brought this down a little bit so that the transition from slow to fast is a little bit quicker. I didn't really do much with this at all really. The rears I haven't touched, and this adjustment here, it could make a tiny difference. I couldn't say I've noticed the difference there. Moving on to fuel, obviously it's a time trial event, so fuel's negated completely, so it's just a thing that I do, bringing it down to its minimal value. Obviously we want maximum boost, and the radiator, usually I would close this completely because it usually helps such an amount that closing this for one lap is an absolute must. But the engine is so inefficient and suffers so much with heatsink, you can't possibly close this out. I think if you close this out, you'd probably have about 40% engine damage by the end of the 7 minutes. So I just left this fully open. I think as standard it's set at 75. I just fully opened it. I didn't change the gear ratio. You can't really change individual values here to a massive degree. It just jumps from, obviously this being third gear, it would now be second gear. It's the same value. Adjusting these doesn't really help you at all because there's no real adjustment. You're either getting rid of a gear and moving like first to second. It's pointless altogether. So all you can change is the final drive. Well, if you move this to the right, it shortens the whole gear ratio. So when you're coming along a lot of the straights, by adjusting it to this value, you would be just hitting top gear and just be bouncing off the rev limiter on some of the long straights. So that was just pointless. Bringing it down to 411, it was the only choice really. The ECU, obviously this is usually set at 10% and 85. Well, I left the 85 as it was, quite happy with that. Traction control, during this I used traction control on its highest setting. So this value is taken into consideration. And I just felt the car was still sliding a little bit through the turns, so just needing a little bit of traction control. Moving on to the dampers, the differential, sorry. Not something I generally mess with on the front end of the car. I really need to spend a little bit of time learning about how the geared LSD works. Not something I've spent a lot of time doing, but I just felt like the front end of the car wasn't pulling enough. So obviously if you're going through the turns and you're getting lots of rear drifting, I just wanted the car more to four-wheel drift, so that there was that constant movement forward. So by introducing more power amp on the front end of the car, I wanted the front end of the car to be pulling just as much as the rear end of the car was pushing. So just adjusting this value from 20 as standard. Moving to the rear end of the car. Not a huge adjustment here. Just adjusting the preload a little bit to try and get the car to turn a little bit less during the corner. Off throttle. I do need to spend more time on this, to be honest, because someone mentioned that my interpretation of the coast ramp could be wrong in Project Cars 2. In my opinion, if, let's say for example, you've got a perfect U-turn or quite a big hairpin, and the car coming into the turn reaches a point where it needs to go through, so the inside wheel could almost stop turning, but the outside wheel's got a long way to travel, so it needs to rotate far quicker than the inside wheel. So in my interpretation of the coast ramp on this game is the lower the figure, the coast ramp figure, the more it allows for each wheel to turn independently. So if I bring this all the way down to 20, it's going to allow this outside wheel to turn at a completely different rate as the inside wheel. And the more you increase this figure to say 90, it would be turning both wheels at the same time, almost at the same speed, which doesn't help turning the car, because it's almost trying to push the car. So by allowing that other one wheel to turn on its own, it helps the car turn under deceleration. Anyway, I adjusted this by one click to the right, putting it up to 40, it was at 35. And the power ramp, just to stop the car spinning too much through the corners, and just to add a little bit more traction control, really, that's how I look at it. I just increased this to 75. So that was a tune. Let's have a look at a massive lap then now. I'll try and talk you through where to get a good lap time. So just increase this volume. I'll not increase it too much, just so we can hear the car. Just make a start. So initially, when we come onto the game, we're rolling away. I'll just do that again. Actually, just do it as we start. Foot flat on the accelerator. Crossing the line at 89 miles an hour. So let's stop that there and restart it. Now, when I first started this game, I thought, okay, let's have a look in the rear view mirror. Can I reverse? So let's bang it into reverse, and I come all the way back, and no penalty. Right to the point as far as I can get. Now let's see how fast we are when we're crossing the line. So we're past the 89. So we're almost doing 112 miles an hour as we go over the line. We've got a 12 mile an hour increase. 112, 90, something like that. 20 miles an hour increase. Yeah, 22 mile an hour increase. So obviously that's got to have an effect on the lap time. Well, having done the lap, I think it adds about half a second you're better in the lap time by just reversing all the way back and getting that extra speed across the line. There's no penalty in it, and the lap time stands. So anyway, we're coming around turn one, and we're in fourth gear as we come through here. Just really trying to keep tight around here, feathering it on the brake pedal. Like I said, the brake pedal is really getting the car to turn. So you should be flat out from a little bit further back in fourth gear, all the way through this section. And the car just handles so well. A nice bit of a slide through here, but in fifth gear all the way through. Braking down to fourth gear and just feathering the brake pedal, staying in fourth, and just dropping down into third and second as we come through here. And you're literally turning the car on the brake pedal as we come through here, just getting the car to slide, adding a little bit more brake, reducing the brake, and it's the brake that's turning through here. A nice heavy press of the brake pedal here to get the car to really spin and try and get through here as quick as you can, letting the car slide out. So we're flat out all the way through here, right up to fifth gear. And we're just looking on the right hand side here for this caution symbol, and around here I'm just going to take a little dab on the brake pedal, because I've been through this section so many times. Sometimes you get a penalty for cutting the circuit, sometimes you don't get the penalty. If you stay in fifth gear, sometimes you get the penalty. It was so inconsistent through this section nailing a lap seemed to be inconsistent, because sometimes you could get through it, sometimes you didn't. So sometimes I'd approach here, a little dab of the brake pedal and into fourth to fly over this curb, or sometimes I'd try and stay in fifth, but you're just trying to get that perfect line all the way through, missing everything. And I think I stayed in fifth gear on my fastest lap. So all the way through here, flat out, just foot on the pedal, looking for the lamppost on the left hand side to just hit the brake pedal, nice and easy, just building that pressure on the pedal down into second gear. Just helps the car turn, and you're mounting the curb a little bit, keeping a straight line, and then on the power again up to third gear. I did drop down to second, but you can stay in third for this corner, just nice and tentatively all the way around. And usually when I'm accelerating here, I'm looking up and I can see the timer, and I'm hitting this lamppost at 1.2, 1.3 seconds, or 1 minute 2 seconds, 1 minute 3 seconds, and then full on the power all the way around here, trying to look down at the gauge here so that we're changing gear. That's always a really bumpy section. You don't get that in the GT3 cars, just hitting the bump stops. So through here, it's the tiniest lift off. We're flat out now, tiniest lift of the accelerator to get the car to move, and then back on the power. I look straight down at the speedo here, and I want to be seen at around 158, 160, so we're absolutely flat out. Flying over here, you sometimes get a tiny dab of the pedal to keep the nose down, dropping down to fourth gear, and we'd literally fly over this section, keeping in fourth gear, and as the car comes round it tightens up a little bit, tiny dab of the brake pedal, stay in fourth gear, and then dropping down to third as it tightens up here, back on the power, third gear, and we're going to stay in third. I think I actually come up to fifth and then drop it down to third for this corner. And again here, just try and keep this car suffers with turbo lag hugely, so trying to keep sort of blipping the accelerator to keep the momentum in the engine. So we're trying to stay in third gear all the way around there and just keeping the engine speed up best we can. Dropping down into fourth gear, tiny dab of the accelerator, brake pedal, missing that sign, and we're just tapping the brake pedal as we come round here to get the car to turn. At the marker, dropping it down to third gear, light on the brake pedal, then heavy on the brake pedal, just really helps the car to turn in. Accelerating round into fourth gear, tiny section, dropping down to third, just hug the curb as much as you can. Through into second gear, heavy on the brake pedal, turns the car really well. Into third gear, just really tentative round here, keeping in third gear. We're coming all the way down to first gear here, really hugging it, getting the car to turn as quick as we can. Up to second, third, fourth, and then we're just tentatively on the accelerator around here, get the car to turn, get it straight, and then full on the power. Crossing this point here, we want to be seeing 242, 243 really on the lap time. And as we hit the manhole there, just braking nice and hard down to third gear. Try and keep on the inside, and we should be dropping into fourth gear just around here. Full whack on the power, all the way around. Just pedal to the floor, dropping into sixth gear, just brings the car down, the nose down. And we're just looking to go straight over the curve into mid-air, flat on the throttle, not a single lift at all the way through here. Drop down to fifth gear, a bit more acceleration, then braking into fourth or third, clipping there and taking it as far wide as you can. All the way up to fifth gear. And then this is an awkward one here as you come through. We're trying to get over this without taking a penalty. And then braking as we get to this pylon. Down into second gear, taking a nice apex, and then running the car wide as we can. third, fourth, before we start coming down to second gear again. Nice and early to try and get the car to turn in and get on the power so it doesn't lag too much. The car's fighting you all the time through here, just trying to get the traction down, then braking heavily down to second gear, taking right at the apex and turning the car as quick as you can, and keeping on the accelerator as you can almost while you're braking to keep the engine speed up. You can see the car's just fighting at the rear end. As soon as we're over this jump, nice and slowly down to second gear, but quickly, if you know what I mean. Not jumping the gears too much, you want to keep that traction in the wheels. Up to third, fourth, you're sliding all the way around here at full pelt. Cutting this a little bit as you come over, and this one's a bit awkward because you get a lot of air through here. Down into third, down into second as you come over the brow of the hill, and then back on the power for a little squeeze, and then back on the power again, trying to get a nice line out of there, fully on the power. Again, power, 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 all the way up to fifth gear. As you come over the next crest, you're going to be nice and gentle on the brake pedal, pull the nose down, and then turning in, back on the power as quick as you can, getting that engine speed back up. We're going to try and cut the corner as we come across here because you get on the power much quicker. And again, all the way through here on the power, try and keep the car a bit straight because it sort of comes up over a crest and then levels off and then down again. And you're absolutely flat out on the power now in fifth gear. We're not going to change down the gear, a tiny dab of the brake pedal to turn the car as we come into here. It's still in fifth gear, all the way up. And you can run the car nice and wide out here, braking at the lamppost into fourth gear, and try and maintain the best line you can through here. If the car runs out, stay in fourth gear. It maintains much better speed than dropping down to third. So flat out all the way here, run the car nice and wide, flat out again as soon as you can, and we're sort of going to try and mount the inside curve here so that we can get on the power all the way. Staying in fifth gear here, braking at the arrows, back on the power again, dropping down to fourth, then to third, and then back into fourth gear as we come through here, back on the power. Looking for the manhole there and then braking. Try and get tight through here on the left hand side, and then up into fifth gear. You can carry fifth gear through into here, down to fourth, just to get the car to turn in. Bit of a rubbish line there. And then into third gear, follow it wide, and then you want to be coming back in almost into fourth gear as you come up through there again. Down into third, nice tight line again, and braking hard for this one. Staying in third gear, but you need to keep tight on the right hand side because you want to be back on the full power here. Fourth, still full power, full power, full power, all the way through here, full power, then braking, and then full power again. Keeping nice and tight on this inside because the car will just drift wide on its own. Tiny blip into fifth, then back into fourth. Nice and gentle around here because you're going to be from here full power all the way really. Fifth, full power, the car will just drift on its own, and then back on full power again. As soon as it straightens out, into third gear, and then running the car wide as you can, third gear, full power, crossing the line, under 7. So let's see that at full speed. Let's go.